Nobody thought about termination of condominiums in the 1970s and the
No, because there were new
80s.
buildings then. Those were newer buildings at that point still.
Right. So who thought about this stuff? And now you're getting a building that was built in the 80s and the land value is so high
Yeah.
and that people can't afford to make those repairs. So now what? What are you going to do?
All right. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone, wherever time zone you are watching this or listening to this podcast. I am your host, Matthew Krinzman, and this is the Krinzman Property Playbook. Today, I have as a guest, Dana Robin Goldman, Esquire. And Dana is a local real estate attorney here in South Florida. And a fun fact about Dana, you were the mayor of Sunny Isles Beach, vice mayor of Sunny Isles Beach, and a commissioner of Sunny Isles Beach. Are you still a commissioner? Are you still on the board there? Or do you need term out?
I'm working on a next round.
Okay. All right. Great.
That's somewhat imminent.
Good.
Once you get into public service, it never gets out of your bloodstream. It's one of those things, you know?
So let's say here, how long and cumulatively have you served the city of Sunny Isles Beach?
About 9 years.
9 years. How many of those years were you the mayor?
A year.
A year. Okay. What year was that?
2022 to 2023.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. And how are you obviously you live in Sunny Isles Beach. How long have you lived in Sunny Isles Beach?
Since 2000. So before I started in office, I was actually on an advisory committee. So I've been volunteering / involved in public service for even longer than those 9 years.
Right.
And again, I'm going back in. So we'll see
Good luck.
soon.
Yeah.
Soon to play in a theater near you.
Gotcha. So you've been in Sunny Isles since year 2000.
2000.
And you were served in various capacities on the city commission for 9 years. And now looks like you're going to get back into it, but we'll kind of cover that a little bit later. But your main focus, your job is you're a real estate attorney. And as a real estate attorney, tell us what you do exactly.
So I'm a bit of a subcategory or a subset of real estate attorney in that I don't have that traditional type practice, but I do certain categories. So for example, I am a covenant drafter. I do condominium documents and homeowners association documents. I do regulatory filings. I do recordation of declarations and amendments and other filings. I'm somewhat of a specialist in the area of purchase and sale agreements, contract forms. And then, of course, I represent condominium associations and in certain instances, individuals who have issues with their associations. So anything that's under the orbit of Chapter 718, which is the Condominium Act, or Chapter 720, which is the Homeowners Association Act. Once in a while, I'll do a little co-op stuff and have a co-op matter on my plate, but not so many of those, mostly condominium folks.
Yeah, there's not a lot of co-ops to begin with, I think, in South Florida and Florida in general. I mean, there's a few. I think there is one in Sunny Isles. Isn't there's one co-op in Sunny Isles, if I'm not mistaken.
Which one it is. They're in Bay Harbor.
Bay Harbor, there's a
Bay
few.
Harbor.
And Ball Harbor, there's
There
a couple.
One in that I was asked to handle a matter for just last week. It was in kind of the Pompano Beach area.
Yeah.
So there are co-ops out there. They're not that prevalent. In fact, a lot of people call to unwind the co-op structure and turn it into a condominium or, obviously like a tear down for redevelopment.
Right. I have a few that switched in Miami Beach that over the years had switched from co-op to condo over the years. One thing I just off the side of it is just I noticed co-ops generally have sell for less than what condos sell for.
That's right. You know why?
No, I'd love to know why. I think I know why, but I'd like to hear your answer.
Because it can't get financing.
Yes. That's the reason.
You can't get and you know what? When you can't get financing, it definitely affects property value, right?
Finance, yeah.
And so you can't get that traditional financing. And in fact, that was the impetus for the call of it was a co-op in the harbor because they felt the people who called, hey, our project, our units are so
100%.
undervalued because we're co-op. What would it take to convert a co-op structure into a condominium structure?
Right.
Not so easy. There are underlying leases and issues and tax implications. When you're looking to do something like that, first thing you need to do is call the tax experts and figure out what the consequences are of something like that.
Gotcha. So you write covenants for condominium associations, and the covenants get written when? At when they at development time, is that correct? When they're starting to develop the property?
Good question, because in fact, much of what I do is for what we call production home builders. So when a subdivision goes up, it could be, and I do these covenants all over the state of Florida. When these projects go up, you're going to either need a set of covenants for permitting purposes, like the South Florida Water Management District or St. John's or one of the districts. They want to see that there's a responsible party to handle the stormwater aspects of your community, or the county's going to require it as a function of the platting of the subdivision. So you see that. And then, or you're going to see these covenants at a further point in time, or at least drafted and then given at the point of sale, but then recorded. So a lot of the covenant work occurs for the home builders because they're doing these large subdivisions, and somebody's got to get out there and manage those common areas, open space areas, or the recreational facilities, however you slice and dice it. So that's why you need these covenants. There's another fun fact. There's a bill in the Florida legislature where one of our local reps wants to actually abolish
Yeah,
homeowners
I've been
associations,
reading a lot
but
about that. So that's a very interesting turn because
it's a hot topic we
it
can talk
really is.
about.
Yeah.
But really, in fact, a lot of these newer subdivisions, they already are the infrastructure is built out by the CDDs. So in a lot of these subdivisions, CDDs, community development districts, are taking over some of those HOA type functions. But in any event, that's on the HOA side. These covenants are very important, and they are the rule book or the Bible or however you would describe it. They really articulate rights, responsibilities, maintenance obligations, and so forth for the respective people. And of course, these covenants run with the land, so they are part of your property and title, and they're hopefully in perpetuity, unless otherwise, dissolved.
So the HOA
No, no,
covenant you write now, is
and
that it?
then but on the condo side,
That's
so
it.
very
That's where I was going.
important. So a distinction is on the condo side, in under Florida law, you cannot go to sales, an original sale, until you have a prospectus. Usually it's like 20 units or more that you do it, but you cannot, it's like what we would call almost like an offering. It's not a securities offering, but it's like you have to have that condominium prospectus. It's an offering circular and it has a bunch of exhibits and documents that pertain to the condo. So in order to go to sales, gotta have you gotta have those documents. Maybe not recorded,
Right.
but the important distinction is between a HOA and a condominium is that in a condominium, you derive your legal title to your unit through that declaration of condominium. So your legal description comes as the declaration. So that's why it's so important, because it's not only how you define your unit as a unit owner legally, but also your plans, your survey, your actual physical space, and then, of course, the restrictions and the obligations and everything that goes with it. So the declaration of condominium has a very special importance. small distinction in a homeowners association or a subdivision, you as an owner, you own title to lot, your unit or your lot, like typically a platted lot, sometimes meets and bounds, another description if it's a townhome in a certain county or whatever. But as an HOA, you own title to your lot and home separately, but the association, the governing HOA owns the common areas or the common property, unless obviously there's a CDD or another entity that owns and manages, whether it's a lift station or so forth.
Right.
In a condominium, you own title or fee simple title to your unit, and you have an undivided interest in the common
Percentage,
elements.
right? It's like whatever point the common elements.
Right. So that's why in a condominium, you have a much greater stake, right? The HOA, they control the common areas, they own it, and you're an owner. But in a condominium, everybody's in on that, and everybody owns a piece of that. And that's where the fun begins, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you remember, look, I grew up in Sunny Isles. I'm one of those few people that could say that I grew up in Sunny Isles. And the joke in Sunny Isle, like some people would call them the condo commandos, those
Yes.
who enforced the rules or complained about everyone else in the condominium, what they were doing. And I guess, look, that's kind of what's happening in HOAs on some level, hence the proposed legislation to dis, be able to dissolve HOAs because people who live in a homeowner associations, get a little upset because like, hey, the HOA doesn't let me paint my house a certain way, or I can't fly a flag, and things like that. And there's HOA, I guess HOA commandos, just like there are condos. I think it's living with all those people, condo owners. It's a kind of a tricky situation sometimes because, especially in the board meetings, you
Yeah. I
participate in
mean,
any of those. Oh my,
I've been to a few and then some, but on the HOA side, really where the rubber meets the road is, the architectural restrictions.
right.
Like, don't tell me I can't put up my fence or the tree, the branches over the fence or
Well, I've heard
something. So
those. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you have the covenant enforcement, the violations that people get, my driveway, my
Or no, as
fence,
long
my
as it's
air
sitting on your
conditioning.
driveway, $200 fine. It's things like
Right,
that.
and so that enforcement and that architectural standards, those are typically the areas of a lot of the leaf blower or, however that's done.
Yeah,
But in the condo side, so much more is really in the mix. And,
sure.
the
Roofs,
interesting part is
plumbing.
we condo lawyers, the way we perceive it, it's almost like a paradigm shift. Once Champlain Towers
Oh
hit,
yeah,
it changed all that people think or feel or see or experience
100%.
about a condominium. I think that, there was historically this perception that, you know what, I live here. If you live in a house and your roof has a leak,
Fix it.
you're fixing it. Like, yeah, here's the bill and get the contractor out. But when you're in a condo, you got to pay for that. And it's a whole host of bids
Boy,
and procedures and so forth. But I think now that we've had Champlain Towers and this just dramatic, some might say draconian legislative response to that and, hardening our buildings and hardening our structures and with the reserves and the SIRS and the inspections and so forth, and even, the recertification
yeah,
process that we have here. I think people look at it maybe at their unit a little differently, right? It wasn't, I always, my example that I use is maybe 10 years ago, it's like, well, we want a special assessment because we want to beautify the lobby.
like
And now it's like, wow, we've got like waterproofing, we've got
yeah,
concrete restoration. It's like a very different mindset about, on this unit, this is what needs to be done. These are the requirements. And, we're really talking about safety and, we're talking about, building security.
Right. Being a real estate agent here and growing up here, the condominiums were obviously a big part of for South Florida. And when you're talking about what happened in Champlain Towers and what we were seeing, always seeing, I can see this whenever I got the condo docs or I got the budget, things like that before Champlain, it was that most buildings had no reserves. They would always vote to do no reserves pretty much because everyone didn't want to, I don't want to pay more than I have to. That was the whole thing.
And because people felt, I'm going to sell this unit or I'm not going to live here
Yeah.
forever, or they didn't have the same level of feeling of ownership or accountability,
Right.
right?
Accountability is, that's the big thing. You're right there. You hit it. It's the accountability because you can see the condo associations just kicking the can down the road every time they
That's
quit.
right.
Well, we'll just wait for the 40-year recertification or wait for this certification to happen. Okay, that's 10 years from now, but you're having things that are need to be addressed now before your 40-year because just things wear out, things break, things need to be replaced. And you would see it always. No one wanted to do it. No one wants to pay for it. Now, hey, you may say maybe it was a draconian move by the state legislature to enact all these new rules, but they had to be done. They were left with no choice because I think that for the most part, the state let the associations kind of just be them run by themselves. And although there was a condo board, DPPR can oversee them in some level, but there was no real oversight coming from anywhere in reality. The condo associations are self-governing for the most part, unless someone
That's right.
complained really hard.
And there was a big, I think, a big tussle in the legislature because I think the House was adamant, we're not letting you guys get away with not collecting for reserves because
100%.
that was the thing. And
Yeah.
you know what we describe as you eat McDonald's Big Macs for 20 years and then you go to your cardiologist and the cardiologist says, you've been on a Mac diet and guess what?
You need
And you're
triple
like,
bypass.
so that's what happened.
Yeah.
These condo associations, they were not saving for the rainy day
100%.
and they were
You see
not
that today.
collecting. And the
Yeah.
legislature said,
Tough noogies.
that's it. We're not, you don't get a hall pass. You're going to have those SIRS reports and you have mandatory reserve for SIRS based
Mhm.
reserves. And,
Right. Yeah. I mean,
we knew it was going to flesh out and we also knew it would ultimately depress property
it depends
values,
on
right?
market for it. Yes, 100%. The market, well, the condo market, it definitely was depressed the first few years of all these new rules coming into place because they didn't know how. Most associations didn't know what to do, or they didn't know how to catch up. So once they started putting in the reserve studies in and started collecting reserves and started doing the assessments that needed to be done, not just waiting for the 40-year, although now it's a 30, 40, 50. They changed the rules also on the time limit, the time to do these recertifications. So these buildings have these SIRS, with a SIRS report. So this, everyone knows what it means. Structural Integrity Reserve Study. So you have these engineers that come into your buildings and they go through really the fine comb and just pick through everything. And they say, all right, well, your elevator system has 2 years of useful life left. You need this much money to make the upgrade. You need to replace your roof in now or 10 years from now, things like that. Your concrete restoration needs to be done now. They kept on kicking the can. Now they have to pay for it. So there was a stress on some of these condos, not some, a lot of these condo associations, because they had everyone's getting hit with these huge assessments. Case in point, there was one it was on the news even, Williams Island, it was the Mediterranean villages. Some people were getting hit with $500,000 assessments to get the reserves up and to pay for all the things that need to be done. The properties were no longer worth even what the assessment was. So you had these people, unfortunately, hurt a lot of people on fixed incomes. As you know, there's a lot of, in this area, there are a lot of people on fixed incomes because they're retired and every penny matters. I get it. But there has to be some kind of responsibility on the owners and on the condo associations that, hey, you knew these things were going to happen. You didn't want to take care of it. So now you have to take care of it. So now you have to pay. You have to pay. There's no other choice. But now as you're seeing, personally, what I'm seeing, this is good information for people who are considering condos in South Florida in general, that things are starting to get better. The associations are starting to get better. Oh, they're starting to be managed better. I think all these new rules helped in some way. And now you have condo associations have reserves. And by the way, we talked about financing, not being able to finance a condo, a co-op. Financing for condos is very difficult. But guess what? And this was always true. If the buildings had reserves, at least 10%, it was a lot easier to get a condo financing for those buildings. And you didn't have to go through the big condo questionnaires that normally you have to use. So you could get in with 10%, 5%. So now these buildings get up to speed. I think you'll start seeing the financing get a little bit easier, and you'll have buildings that are going to be in good shape and have good books, have good budgets and good books, and structurally are better off now at the same time. So that's my side on that, but that's what I see. And I think it's been draconian. I've heard some of the legislatures, like our local, like Jason Pizzo, who's local here, and I see him at realtor board events and a couple other legislatures who said, we're not going to make it easier. We can't. This We don't want what happened in Champlain Towers to happen again.
It's all good. It's all true. It's all correct. I mean, the response was very severe, but the policy was also clear. Now, of course, the condo lawyers are grumbling. And of course, you have this other looming issue, especially with scarcity of land and value of
I like where
underlying
you're going
dirt,
here. Yeah.
is the termination issue is, are we going to be, do we want to make it easier? There's a very well reported case, the Biscayne 21
Yeah, I knew people who lived
case,
there. I had friends who lived there.
about there's a big fight going on about that where the developer wanted to go in and terminate, and the documents didn't really support amending the documents to make termination easier, that sort of thing. But what's going to happen to a condo that has passed its useful life? Like, I represent associations or I know of associations just in my travels, they're going on 50, 60, 70 years. What is the useful life? And do the termination provisions of the Condominium Act either speak to, relate to, or even applicable for because of documents? I mean, what are you going to do with these older condominiums that are have real obsolescence and real issues, and the cost to repair far exceeds what the value? Are you going to really put $100,000 a unit in repairs for a unit that's never going to sell for more than 200,000, right? I mean,
Right. And then the
it
developer is
really,
offering you 10x that, for instance,
that's right.
or even
Sometimes.
5 times that. Hey, it's a calculus that the owner has to make at that point. Is it worth it? Look, Biscayne 21 I mean, that's a mess. I know I've been following it, and anyone who's listening or watching this, look up Biscayne 21, look it up. There was a couple of unit owners that held out against the developer, took them all the way up to court in the state courts and won. They won their case against the developer. Now the developer,
The holdovers, the
the
holdouts, the
holdovers, yeah, there's a
holdouts.
few of them. This is where I'm a little fuzzy. I always thought you had to get 90% of unit owners to agree to terminate the condo association, but apparently
No,
that's not true.
it depends. It depends. It depends on, number one, what's in your documents. If the documents require 100% approval, you're dead in the water, right?
One
It
person
isn't going to
holding out.
happen.
Yeah.
If your documents say, have what's called Kaufman language and say the Condominium Act is amended from time to time, then
Mhm.
of course, you're going to go with the current termination provisions, which state, it's typically 80%, but no more than 5% can object. And then there's all in between. So it's like, what's in your governing documents? What's in your declaration of condominium bylaws? And, what developers often seek to do is amend those documents.
Right. By
And
taking
that's where
control.
you get these cases because it's literally impossible or virtually impossible to really terminate if your documents are really giving you, right? And so I worked under the lawyer that did the Tropicana case, which is also a very
I
famous,
know
the
about that one. Yes, I know.
that's
Yeah.
a very well cited, but and she's like a world expert on termination law. In fact, she drafted the termination
Mhm.
statute, which is, 718, I think it's 117. Nobody thought about termination of condominiums in the 1970s and the
No, because there were new
80s.
buildings then. Those were newer buildings at that point still.
Right. So who thought about this stuff? And now you're getting a building that was built in the 80s and the land value is so high
Yeah.
and that people can't afford to make those repairs. So now what? What are you going to do?
Well, the Tropicana is a very interesting case because that one I actually knew about that one. I had some a developer locally was very smart in what they did there, I think, by taking control of enough units to block at the time.
That's right. That's
I mean,
exactly
credit to
what
them,
happened.
they wanted to protect the crown jewel that they had just built. So I understand that. And that's because people always talk,
No
oh,
names,
my views,
no
my
names,
views.
no names.
Yeah. The views are all important. And I get that because people pay for views now. They're paying for the views. And these are some things that what people want to protect. Hey, good move on their part. They succeeded. The building looks good still to this day. I think it's a very cool building. Looks, architecturally,
You
the
know
top
that building, wait, do you know who built that building? Do you know
Morris
who
Lapidus.
the architect was?
Morris
That's right.
Lapidus.
It was the last building that he
He ever
ever
did.
put up.
See, I grew up across the street from it, so I know that building. I grew up there. I grew up across the street over there in Arlen House, so I saw the building get
The
built.
Arlen House?
I remember the Tropicana Motel. That's how far back I go. And the Olympia and all those great little motels and the Aztec and all those places are long gone. They're to the history. They've
I
been
live
dashed.
very close to there.
Yeah. So now they're the dustbin of
I live
history.
very close by.
But Sunny Isles is completely transformed. But at least there in Sunny Isles, to transform the beachfront was a lot easier because all you had to do was go buy these old motels.
A lot of these units, they were timeshares.
They
In
were ti
fact, my mom's, her neighbor, he was a Hungarian Holocaust survivor and he had multiple of those motels and ultimately sold them out. He sold them out to one of the big developers. He had one by one by one. He sold a bunch of motels.
yeah.
And who
No,
would have thought in 40 years ago that what the value now, this latest piece of property,
the new one that's up the street by the
yeah,
bridge just sold. And it's
it's
crazy. Hundreds of millions of
what
dollars now.
70 million an acre, something like that, something
Got
north of 60, 70 million an acre for the dirt.
right. So you're going back to what you were talking about termination of condominiums. And now these buildings are past their, in reality, some of them are past their useful lives. So as an owner, if you're being offered this much money, I mean, I get a lot of them are going to say, where am I going to go? Well, look, you can keep on paying for an asset that's just going to keep on costing you money, or you take the money, move somewhere else, which you can, because some of these people are getting nice paydays. If you look what's going on in Palm Beach, up there where Stephen Ross has just bought out buildings and a couple of other developers are buying out these buildings for $200 million plus, and there's 30, 40 units or 100 units in these buildings. Hey, you're doing all right. You're getting paid in excess of whatever you could sell on the open market today. That's for sure. And there is value
Right.
to those properties.
I'm helping somebody, in actually in North Bay Village on one of those same scenario. A lot of people are fighting over the same piece of land, which is like wide open bay, and
Well,
it's
let's
kind of
address the last
interesting.
point. Look, as especially living in Sunny Isles, has some of the best views depending where you are. If you're on one of those Finger Islands, the Bayview Drive, or you're by Weston Towers, or you're on Coastal Towers, those views are tremendous. Especially if you're facing south, our own house especially. But yeah, you have value. There's tremendous value in the dirt that's underlining your condominium now, and at some point, some of it has to make sense. But if anyone wants to look up a real great case, Game 21, it'll blow your mind. It's crazy. It twists and turns, and it's not going to end for a while, it looks like. But
Developer went right back into court and said, "That's it. I'm suing you guys."
now I'm going to sue you. You sue me, I'm going to sue you. Now we're going to see who's going to bleed out first. But we got a little bit off topic because this was actually really what you're talking about, termination of condominiums. It's what we're seeing now a lot of. And it's a calculus that owners have to start making if they want to keep on paying assessments every few years and increasing the maintenance fees, or there's an opportunity to sell for a lot more than what you can sell on the open market today or what you bought it for. These are decisions that I think people have to start making. Make them for themselves.
But the thing is, there we have a building in Sunny Isles Beach that the units, they've had multiple offers from a developer to buy out. These people, they're like, "Why would I sell out?" And the offer just goes up and up because they're like, "Where am I?
That
Where can I live?
I
Let's say my unit's 250 and you give me 500,000 for that unit. I can't afford any other unit in this city for that money." So,
It's
it's a
a good point.
problem because people they don't wanna leave.
No, that's a
They
good
can't
point you're making
replace
there.
it.
It is tough. It's a tough decision, but what it's showing you is if o buyers they keep on coming back and they keep on raising they're raising the offers, this just shows you the value, how valuable the dirt is in Sunny Isles Beach or just anywhere in South Florida that's on the water, especially. You're sitting on a gold mine essentially at this point. And if you can keep on getting higher and higher offers to a point where it's like, now I can't say no, then great. That's good for everyone involved then at that point, especially for as an owner. So I don't begrudge them, if they want to hold out, get the most they can. But that just shows you the value that we're dealing here with in South Florida, especially the desirability to build here and to build these luxury towers that you see all up and down, especially Sunny Isles and Aventura. Now you're starting to see, obviously in Miami Beach, and then up the coast, now all the way to Fort Lauderdale, Pompano Beach, you're seeing all these development happening because people want to be here. They want to be here. They don't want to dig snow anymore. That's another thing. So we got
Scarcity.
we got a little
Scarcity.
bit we got a little bit off topic. We talked about the restrictions, the lifestyle fits. Just quickly, what's a common pitfall that you're seeing in condo transactions?
I think that the farm forms have changed. I think they're much more evolved, but people don't realize what's the status. Is there a special assessment looming? Are there litigation issues? They don't know what they're buying into, and unless they read the fine print, it's not just about the lien search, it's really about what is the condition of this condominium and this
Which we were
association.
talking about. I
So
mean,
it's not if you don't have your finger on the pulse of that, I think it's a big problem. You need to really understand the condition of this property that you're
this is something that's really being, obviously as realtors and real estate agents locally, it's something that we have to be very aware of what's going
very
on.
because I'll get the call downstream say, "Well, my broker never told me that there was a special assessment," or I didn't know about this lawsuit," or
Right.
I didn't get the memo, so to speak." And they wanna come after the broker.
Yeah, they do. And look, it's a lot of work now for us. I mean, look, if you recall, the condo writer was one page at most at one point. Now it's, I think, 5 pages, and it's become more and more in depth and actually quite confusing on some level because you don't know what box do I check, what days, what are my dates and things like that. Because the dates have changed on things like that. Now it says it's 3 days to review the condo docs, but hang on, there's 7 business days to review the
7,
milestone report or the
7,
serve report.
7.
Yeah, 7 business days,
Oh,
not
it's
calendar
7.
days.
Yeah, 7, yeah,
So
that's right.
you have to be really on top of your dates on things like that, which you should be as a professional when you're managing a transaction. But it gets hard because you're like, what box do I choose here? Is it a SIRS report or is it a milestone report or developer handover report? Which one do I need? And half the time, no one knows which one you need to begin with. That's but I would say this, what helps is if, especially with agents, if you're in a brokerage or an office that takes the time to train and update their agents on the new laws and things like that, it's important that the agents get educated, but it's sometimes it feels like it's overwhelming in how much paperwork has now been put in.
Who's gonna bother to read? I know in Miami-Dade County, there's a new reporting mechanism
Yes,
where the condos have to file. I actually was the origin of that because I tried to get it implemented at the city. The city manager felt like this should be a county, and now somehow my original ordinance became the
the
law
county.
of the land, at least in Miami-Dade County. But the
Yeah,
point is, like, gonna sift through all these engineering reports and who's gonna, it's not just about are they getting the report? What is the true physical condition of this building, right? You have so the pools are shut down in, here the pool. How many condos have an operational pool
that was funny you mentioned that because
right now?
there was an article about a year or two ago about in the Miami Herald about how many I think it was like specifically like Aventura, like of how many buildings in Aventura their pools were closed at one point, and I think it was more than half. Because just because of what happened in Champlain Towers, everyone drained their pools immediately. Everyone just drained their pool. It didn't matter. Even if they was structurally sound, because they had to get the engineers in there to check it. And that's true. Like I remember, like if I can remember specifically, like Turnberry Tower, I was selling a unit there. The now they're going through a big assessment. They're getting the building in good shape, which is about time. But they drained their pool the day after Champlain Tower came down. They drained it and it was not filled back up. It won't be filled up now until they finish their, all their construction work, but it was closed. It's been closed for now 4 or 5
So what
years.
do you do if you do you are you is a physical inspection enough? Or what do you do when you have a buyer? You're gonna tell them, hey, you're
Yeah,
buying
well,
this unit, but we don't know when the pool is gonna be open.
look, at this point, most buildings know when their pool is gonna be reopened, and usually it's, within it's part of the assessment that they're going through right at that point. If it's the structural integrity that they're reshoring the concrete and they're doing all those things, they have a timeline now. Before they didn't have a timeline. Now they all have timelines. And they always like, well, it's gonna be done in 6 months. I'm like, look, they say 6 months, but it's probably gonna be out of real reality. It's gonna be a little bit longer because you have to factor in weather, you got to factor in the workers showing up and or nothing else popping up that needs to be done at that time. These things are getting done now, like I said, but at one point, no one knew, but now they know. I think every building now has to know, and every association has to know. But the buyers are depending on the brokers or the agents to give them that information. It's a lot of responsibility now to make sure they have all the documentation. And God forbid if you miss one piece of documentation, that can kill the deal, or they can come back and haunt you in the future.
Yeah, I mean, one of the areas that have a great degree of specialization is really in the Johnson Davis and the disclosure, something I've
Mhm.
worked on throughout my legal career.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big proponent of disclosure of latent issues,
Mhm.
what to disclose, what not to disclose. I mean, that's more prevalent. I mean, in the realtors forum, you have more of that on the property disclosure, but and you have less of that on the FAR bar form, but it's certainly, on the developer side, you do, that Johnson Davis standard is really an important component.
But we even hear on developers when the developer transfers control to the association, and once the building is sold out and that there's the developers out, there's these lawsuits against developers all the time because of deficiency.
558,
If I yeah, and
558.
that also makes financing difficult. But there are ways to finance it if you have a really good mortgage broker or lender. But the 558 lawsuit is on every single new building because
Every turnover, you know what? The developers build it into their model.
yeah,
They're like, "We know at the end of the day, when we turn over, we're getting slapped with so that's
right.
part of the condo, and that's probably why, these luxury buildings, the pricing is what it is, and why developers probably more gravitate towards, the very high end, the $2,000 a square foot type
Well,
product
that's where we're
because you
at.
know what? It's just part of their doing business is just to get slapped with and it's a statutory there's a statutory provision and
Right.
attorney's fees provisions,
Yep.
and 558s are a way of life.
It really is. And that I don't want people listening or watching is like, that's a terrible thing. It's not a terrible thing. It's just way of life when it comes to new construction and development. It usually gets figured out in a couple of years, and there's money that gets exchanged. The developer will come up with money here, or he'll have the contractors come in. All right, we'll improve this, we'll fix this, and that's just the nature of the
It's a way
business.
to get them to
Yeah,
clean up whatever needs to be cleaned up before they ride off into their next
into the
project
sunset.
or however that's done.
But luckily for us, our many of our developers they just move over to the next property next door, so they're there already.
They're there.
And for the most part, look, I think really since 2008, I think our developer groups here have gotten a lot stronger and really more savvy. I think not that there's fewer fly by night developers, like to say. There are really some really good established developers here now who have been in business, who know the market, know the areas, and are building quite interesting buildings in a lot of respects. And like you said, $2,000 a square foot you're hitting, which never thought that would be possible as a kid in Sunny Isles. But not to say that's impossible, it's just because this is where I'm from. So that's what you know. That's what you know. You're like, oh, well, you buy this condo with an amazing intercoastal view for $150,000. Now that doesn't exist anymore, but that's just a proof and positive of how we've developed as an area. Not just Sunny Isles is a microcosm because it's such a small area. You can see it, but beyond all of South Florida and Florida in general, the growth has been tremendous. We are really no longer, I think, look, I can say about Sunny Isles, it's no longer just a place to come and retire and steal the sweet and low packets from the Rascal House, which doesn't
From the
exist anymore,
Rascal House.
people. But that's what it was. You remember, the sweet and low packets, and they take the rolls home, and that was it. There was no elementary school. There was no schools, actually. There was nothing. I joke, because like I was the youngest person in Sunny Isles, probably from the 20 years at some point. But
That's
again,
funny.
it's a microcosm of what has transpired here in South Florida. Sunny Isles is a
It's
great
changed a lot.
microcosm. It's
I call
amazing.
the skyline, yeah,
The
I call our
skylines,
skyline like the jewelry.
like I said, there are all these little motels up and down the street, which when I was a kid or a teenager was a fun place to go to because you could hop from one place to the next or on the beach. These were different times, obviously. So, it's nice you can be nostalgic, but you also have to look forward to what's happening and how the growth here has been just unbelievable. And you've been, as a commissioner on the city, you've seen it, you've been part of it. You've known, you see it all the time. And if you're going to be back on the commission as a mayor or a city commissioner, you'll still be heavily involved in it and what the future is going to bring for the city. I'd like to see the west side of Collins Avenue see some new development, but that's up to the owners there. And I think at some point in their lives, they will.
That's the new frontier, as they
That is
say.
that is a new frontier, and we'll see what happens. It's amazing the growth that we've seen here. So I think we've covered a lot. I like where this went because we talked about things that normally I don't think a lot of people know about, especially with the terminations, covenants, and all these new things that have come through the legislature to improve the buildings. And also, I think we gave people some good food for thought on, hey, you're living in a 50-year-old building that's soon going to be maybe going on 60 years. Things to think about as to the viability of these buildings at this point, the older buildings especially, and the worth of the land underneath those buildings. So anyone needs a good advice, you're the person to talk to, especially for Sunny Isles or anywhere else in South Florida.
Hey, I'm one of the condo queens. What can I say?
Dana, where can we find you? How do people get in touch with you if they need your expertise?
I am always reachable. My website is danagoldmanpa.com. My telephone number is 305-308-0040. I have an office location in Aventura, and I'm always out and about.
Yes.
Anybody can call me anytime. They usually do all the time on condo related questions. So
Well, that's good. That's
I
good to
do
be.
speak condo.
That's good because there's generalists and then there's experts. specialists, I like to say. So it's good to be a specialist, especially in the condo world where we've talked about it. Our area is so dominated by. To be a specialist in this market and to be a specialist in this field is definitely something that I think people who are looking at condos or looking to do a termination or to create build a condo, talk to Dana. She's the person to talk to about this. If you want to sell a condo or buy a condo, I'm your person to talk to about that. Now we're at the
That's
contract, and
right.
then Dana can do the closing and make sure I dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and checked off all the boxes correctly for the buyer and for the seller. And, make sure that we have a smooth and clean transaction and everyone's happy at the end of the day at the closing table. That's it for me. I'm Matthew Krinzman. I'm your host, the Krinzman Property Playbook. Hit subscribe, give us a like, give us a comment, reach out to either one of us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
If you're ready to play smarter in South Florida's real estate market, the next episode is packed with strategies and conversation you do not want to miss. Click the video on the screen to keep watching the Krinzman Property Playbook.